The town of Black Hollow, nestled deep within the dense forest of weathering pines, had always been a place of quiet charm. Dr. Eleanor Graves had returned to it, seeking solace after years spent in the city. A forensic psychologist by trade, she had seen the darkest corners of the human mind and longed for the predictable rhythm of a small town. Her late grandmother's house, a sprawling Victorian relic perched at the edge of town, offered exactly that, or so she had hoped. Eleanor was meticulous, driven by an insatiable curiosity. Her days were spent running her small consulting practice, helping the local sheriff's department with the occasional missing person or domestic dispute. But her true passion lay in unraveling the mysteries that lurked beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. The town itself, with its cobbled streets and narrow alleys, exuded an eerie tranquility. Black Hollow had an old-world charm, the kind that made you feel as if time had slowed to a crawl. Shops with hand-painted signs lined Main Street, their windows filled with antique curios and handmade quilts. The town square boasted a gnarled oak tree at its center, older than the town itself, or so the locals claimed. Life in Black Hollow revolved around community traditions: the annual Harvest Fair, the Winter Lantern Festival, and weekly book club meetings at the local library. Eleanor quickly became a familiar face, and though she valued her solitude, she found herself drawn to the warm-hearted residents. There was June, the elderly baker with an uncanny knack for knowing everyone's secrets, and Thomas, the bookstore owner, whose collection of rare tomes intrigued her endlessly. Her evenings were spent curled up by the crackling fireplace, the scent of old paper filling the air as she lost herself in the intricate cases she had once studied. But something had begun to change in Black Hollow, an unsettling current running just beneath the surface. It started with whispers, stories of strange dreams plaguing the townsfolk. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Who hadn't had the occasional nightmare? But as the weeks stretched on, the stories grew darker, more persistent. Children woke screaming in the night, muttering about shadowy figures watching them from their windows. Adults found themselves paralyzed in their beds, their eyes locked onto the dark corners of their rooms, where something seemed to shift and writhe. Eleanor herself wasn't immune. She awoke more than once, drenched in sweat, her dreams filled with twisted corridors and haunting whispers that seemed to echo long after she awoke. The rational part of her mind dismissed it as stress, but deep down, something gnawed at her. The town was changing, and she couldn't ignore it. Then came the disappearances. Nothing overtly suspicious at first. A drifter failing to turn up for his usual morning coffee. A reclusive artist no longer seen sketching by the river. But the tension in the air thickened, an unspoken fear spreading through the streets. Eleanor felt it in the way people averted their eyes, in the tremble of hands clutching cups too tightly at the cafe. It was June who found the first body. She had gone to open her bakery at dawn and stumbled upon it in the alley behind her shop, A young man, his face twisted in terror, eyes wide and unseeing. The sheriff arrived quickly, but the sight sent a ripple of fear through Black Hollow. Eleanor watched from the edge of the crowd, her forensic instincts kicking in. Something about the scene felt wrong, deeply wrong. The body bore no signs of injury, no bruises or wounds. It was as if whatever had taken him had done so without ever laying a hand on him. The only clue was the look of pure, abject horror frozen on his face. A heart attack, maybe? Sheriff Whitaker muttered, scratching his head beneath his worn hat. But Eleanor knew better. This was no heart attack. This was something far more insidious. She stepped closer, the weight of years of experience pressing down on her. There, in the young man's palm, was something curious, a fragment of paper, crumpled tightly, carefully. She pried it free, smoothing it out with steady hands. It bore a single word scrawled in trembling handwriting: Phantasm. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. The word resonated deep within her, stirring memories she had long buried. Something ancient had awakened in Black Hollow, and it was up to her to find out what. The investigation had begun. Eleanor wasted no time immersing herself in the investigation. She examined the young man's belongings, but nothing out of the ordinary stood out, except for the slip of paper. She took it back to her study, poring over its every detail, wondering if the word phantasm held any historical significance to Black Hollow. A search through old town records revealed nothing, but a growing sense of unease settled in her chest. Determined to dig deeper, Eleanor visited the local library, where Thomas offered his assistance. They combed through archives and folklore books, uncovering unsettling tales of an ancient entity said to prey on dreams. A pattern began to emerge, linking past disappearances with eerie mentions of a shadowy presence lurking just beyond sight. As Eleanor questioned the townsfolk, a pool of potential suspects formed. There was the enigmatic groundskeeper at the cemetery, known for his peculiar ramblings about things that walk at night. The eccentric artist, who had gone missing weeks before, had left behind unsettling paintings of eyes hidden within the trees. Even June, with her sharp intuition, seemed to know more than she was letting on. Each encounter revealed more tangled threads, but no clear answers. Fear simmered beneath every conversation, a silent agreement that something beyond their understanding had taken root in Black Hollow. Just when Eleanor thought she was making progress, a fire broke out at the library, reducing crucial records to ash. It was too coincidental to ignore. Someone or something didn't want the truth uncovered. Eleanor suspected she was being watched, a shadow always lingering at the edges of her vision. Determined, she pursued various theories. Was it a mass hysteria gripping the town? Or was there truly an ancient force at play? Her attempts to rationalize met with dead ends, and each sleepless night brought darker dreams. A second body was found, this time in the abandoned church on the outskirts of town. Unlike the first victim, This one had something else, a strange symbol carved into the wooden pew beside them. Eleanor felt the pieces falling into place, but the picture they painted terrified her. The entity was growing stronger. The town of Black Hollow was teetering on the edge of hysteria. Another resident had vanished, this time young Emily Carter, a promising artist known for her paintings of shadowy landscapes that now seemed eerily prophetic. Eleanor felt the town's fear pressing down on her, thick as the fog that crept through the streets at dusk. Her own nightmares had grown more vivid, the whispers louder, as if the entity was drawing closer. The sheriff's office was overwhelmed with panicked reports, strange figures seen lingering at the edge of the woods, flickering lights in abandoned homes, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Eleanor knew she had to act fast, but with each passing hour, the town's trust in her waned. Eleanor sat hunched over her desk, surrounded by crumbling newspaper clippings and dusty town records. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they painted was too dreadful to fully accept. Black Hollow's founders had conducted rituals, desperate invocations to an entity that thrived on fear, offering protection in exchange for something unspeakable. The whispers, the dreams, the disappearances, all of it pointed to a cycle that had repeated for centuries. Eleanor's hands trembled as she traced a line through an old map, noticing an unsettling pattern of incidents tied to the town's oldest structures. The answer lay beneath them, in the forgotten catacombs that stretched beneath Black Hollow, like veins feeding a hungry heart. But something still eluded her. Why now? What had stirred the entity from its slumber? She needed to revisit those she suspected most, and one name stood out among the rest. Determined, Eleanor sought out June at the bakery. The elderly woman had always seemed to know more than she let on, and Eleanor pressed her for answers. With a heavy sigh, June led Eleanor to the cellar beneath the bakery, revealing a collection of journals, chronicles of past events, carefully recorded by her ancestors. The truth was staggering. The entity, known in whispers as the Phantasm, was bound to the town through an ancient pact, one that required renewal every few decades. But something had gone wrong this time. Someone had broken the balance, and now it was hungry. Armed with new knowledge, Eleanor confronted Thomas at the bookstore, where she found him burning records, attempting to erase crucial details. His family, descendants of the original settlers, had tried to appease the Phantasm through offerings, but the entity's hunger had grown insatiable. Cornered, Thomas revealed that the final ritual was set to take place beneath the town square that very night. With the pieces falling into place, Eleanor felt the horror of what was to come. The Phantasm was no longer content to lurk in the shadows. It was waking, and it wanted more than just fear. It wanted control. Eleanor stood in the darkened town square, the chilling wind whipping through the empty streets. Doubt gnawed at her. The town had turned against her, afraid of the truths she uncovered. She was alone. The old oak loomed above, its twisted branches casting skeletal shadows across the cobblestones. Time was running out, and the phantasm's presence was palpable, an oppressive force pressing against her mind. She clutched the leather-bound journal filled with the secrets June had shared, her knuckles white with tension. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the lanterns lining the square, plunging the town into an eerie darkness. The oppressive silence was shattered by a low, resonant hum that rose from the depths beneath her feet. The ritual had begun. As she hesitated, whispers slithered through the darkness, their ghostly cadence taunting her resolve. Faces of the missing flickered in her memory, their vacant eyes pleading for salvation. Eleanor steeled herself and made her way to the entrance of the catacombs, pushing aside the heavy iron gate with trembling hands. Descending into the labyrinthine catacombs beneath the square, Eleanor was met with flickering torchlight and the acrid scent of burning incense. The air was thick, almost suffocating, carrying the whispers of ancient rites performed long before Black Hollow's founding. Shadows shifted along the damp stone walls, their movements eerily synchronized with her own. In the heart of the catacombs, she found Thomas, his face contorted in terror, kneeling before a towering, amorphous figure that pulsed with a sickly glow. The phantasm. It was a grotesque manifestation of writhing shadows, its form constantly shifting between incomprehensible shapes. Thomas muttered incantations from a crumbling tome, his voice trembling with both reverence and dread. Eleanor's voice cut through the ritual like a knife. "Enough, Thomas. You can't control it." The phantasm swiveled toward her, its formless visage contorting into a twisted mockery of a human face. It spoke in a cacophony of voices, each word dripping with ancient malice. "You cannot stop what was promised." Summoning every ounce of courage, Eleanor reached into her satchel and pulled out the counter-incantations she had pieced together from the journals. She recited the words with conviction, her voice rising above the unholy chorus. The phantasm recoiled, its form writhing violently, lashing out. In a desperate attempt to regain control, the shadows clawed at Eleanor, trying to breach her mind, but she pushed forward. Knowledge was her weapon, and courage her shield. With each recited word, the phantasm weakened, its grip on the town loosening. Thomas let out a strangled cry, collapsing as the creature's hold over him dissipated. As the first light of dawn crept into the catacombs, Eleanor emerged victorious, the remnants of the phantasm dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Thomas, his face streaked with tears, was taken into custody by the sheriff, who had arrived with a small group of townsfolk drawn by the commotion. Black Hollow, though still haunted by its past, began to heal. The disappearances ceased, and the nightmares that plagued the townsfolk faded. The town square, once a place of fear, slowly reclaimed its charm, but the memory of what lurked beneath remained etched in Eleanor's mind. As she walked the quiet streets, she realized her work was far from over. The phantasm, might have been banished, but darkness had a way of creeping back. She returned to her study, poring over the ancient texts, preparing for whatever lurked in the unseen corners of the world. The battle had been won, but Eleanor knew the war against the unknown was never truly over. She had learned that even the deepest fears could be conquered with courage, determination, and an unwavering pursuit of truth.